Hey there, welcome back to High Infidelity, the best channel for cheating stories. Like and subscribe to channel for more spicy stories. Now, let's get into today's story video. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, face the consequences. As this is quite new, I thought I'd publish it here for anybody who has lately been cheated on and needs some catharsis. I met Jane after leaving a long-term relationship peacefully. I didn't think I'd want to date again, but Jane and I hit it off right away. And it was such a pleasant surprise. We hung out as friends before dating, and we moved in together within 6 months. I'd long ago moved on from my ex, and Jane and I were doing well and routinely discussing the future. Before meeting her, I was extremely socially shy and only had a few excellent friends, but she had a vast group of acquaintances and friends she introduced me to, many of whom became good friends of mine. Jane tells me around a year into our relationship that she had a one-night fling with someone she met at the pub. Begs pardon, says she's very sorry, that she wasn't accustomed to drinking, and all the typical reasons. I trust her because I don't want to lose this relationship, and I've spent so much time thinking about my future with her. It wasn't easy, and I ended up in counseling for my anxiety, but we got through it after many chats, tears, and long nights, gradually restoring trust after she reaffirmed me on a daily basis that I was the one for her, and that she was still devoted to our relationship. I told a few close common acquaintances, who kept it a secret. Everything looked to be back on track, and I believed we had recovered. Another year goes by and I notice Jane is acting strangely. She's gone more often, is more secretive about her phone, and I'll wake up to find her on the internet rather than in bed. There are red flags waving. She informs me one weekend that she's heading to her mother's house to assist her with spring cleaning. I don't get along with or talk to her mother. Her mother is an extremely religious woman who was already upset with Jane for living with me before marriage and a few other personal decisions on her end, and believes she has control over her life because she financially supports her, which is why I assume she figured it'd be a safe bet I wouldn't talk to her mom. I contacted her a few hours after she departed, and it went straight to voicemail, indicating that her phone was turned off. So I phoned her mother, knowing she wouldn't answer, and left a message inquiring if Jane had arrived safely at her place. It had been hours and I hadn't heard from her. After a few minutes, she phones me back and tells me that she phoned Jane and didn't receive a response, which I knew she wouldn't. I began to inquire as to when she had departed and so on. I informed her that she was leaving that morning to assist her with spring cleaning. This was news to her mother, who had never mentioned it to her. Her concern for Jane had gotten her chatting. I sat there thinking about what I'll say to Jane when she calls her mother and has time to come up with an explanation. She arrives home later that night and seems completely unconcerned. Her phone is still turned off, so she hasn't even received calls from me or her mother. Perfect. When I ask her how her day went, she tells me how much she dislikes dusting. There was so much on the top of the cupboards. And how they had to take things down to the basement. An elevator would have been wonderful. And all that good stuff. I then decide to inform her that I was aware she hadn't seen her mother. To cut a long tale short, she confesses to cheating on me again, and has been doing so since I forgave her the first time. While I was dealing with anxiety and insecurity, while she was assuring me that it would never happen again and that I was the only one for her, while we talked about buying a house and all our goals, she was around with the same guy, mostly online, but meeting up with him for quickies during the day. And I simply shut down, went to stay with a friend, and told Jane it was all done. The more I thought about it, the more my melancholy turned to rage, and the more foolish I felt for giving her another opportunity. I had squandered 2 years of my life by making myself vulnerable to someone I had fallen in love with, who I believed loved me, and who had made a fool of me. Jane was distraught, phoning me, my friend with whom I was staying, emailing, and threatening to come up in the hopes of solving things. She was on the edge of a nervous breakdown, stating she'd do everything to make things right, go to therapists, give me complete access to her accounts, anything, to reclaim the past. That's when I realized I had a chance to retaliate against her. I informed her that I wanted to be able to forgive her, but that significant adjustments were required. She seized the chance. I told her I wanted to be sure she was serious about our future together. First, I wanted to consider renting a larger space, someplace free of negative memories. We were on a month-to-month lease, so I gave my landlord notice and requested her to begin the process of finding us a new lease somewhere since I couldn't take it right then. I then informed her that if we're going to learn to trust again, I'd want to start thinking about getting married. I don't want to think about the past. If I do, I'm going to want to leave. I only want to think about the future, and the first step should be establishing a joint account. I told her I still trusted her with my money and she agreed. I transferred a few $100s into the account and informed her that I had spent the remainder of my funds on paying 2 months advance rent to a friend with whom I was living, and that he would return it to me in installments since I would be moving out sooner than expected. Now that everything was in place, I assumed I'd damage her social life, but I understood it would need more planning to do it. So I asked her to return to our flat. We remained there till the end of the month. We sobbed together, she was overly loving, let me see her remove her social media profiles, and most days she served me breakfast. She was just so sorry. I wanted to yell at her, but instead I'd plead for comfort and reassurance, pretending to be a wounded animal. We also had a lot of makeup, which is the one thing I feel somewhat bad about, and she made sure to be especially daring for my sake. So when I asked if I could snap some photographs, she said yes. During this period, I had become estranged from our shared friends, declining invitations, and saying things like Jane wouldn't want me to go, or asking a few one-on-one for advice on how to manage it when their spouse becomes angry. Is your spouse prone to breaking things or slapping you? Jane would never do anything like that. I was simply curious. Then, just before we were supposed to move into the new house, I got cold feet. I told her I didn't think I'd be able to accomplish it, that I just did not trust her. She was in a panic, asking with me not to go again and imploring for whatever she could do to make things right. So I informed her that I thought our social group had put her up to it. She vowed on her life that no one knew, but I questioned how I could trust her. I don't trust her with them since she lied to me twice before. A new beginning often involves new individuals in our life. That I'd never feel safe again as long as these folks I'm not sure I can trust were around. I worked her down to the point where she agreed to ghost them all. That, though, was insufficient for me. I informed her that I needed to destroy the bridge because I didn't trust them. As soon as she goes, I contact my buddy, and we pack everything I brought over and return it to his apartment. Then I messaged my friends, telling them Jane had been violent for the previous several months, a lie, which is why I hadn't gone out, and that she had blocked them because she believed I told them and they were pushing me to leave her. I then went to the bank and depleted our joint account, which included around $400 from me and approximately $3,700 and some change from her. Then I wrote an email to Jane's mother claiming to be an enraged ex who had access to my phone, which had all of the sensual images I had taken with Jane. I just thought you should be aware of what your daughter and that piece of trash are up to. Finally, I had a buddy strike me in the eye twice, causing it to swell. Then I blocked Jane and requested 2 of our common friends to meet up with me. So I had her rejoin and write a message to the group, chat about false pals and backstabbers, and how she was better off without them, then ban them all. She sobbed for a long time over it, but if it was necessary for me to remain, she'd get over it. I got a number of messages from common friends wondering what the hell was going on, to which I replied that it was complex and that I'd speak to them soon. After a few more days, it's time to relocate to the new location. We spend the day moving things in and Jane is virtually delirious with excitement when we speak about our future plans. I tell her to go collect anything she needs from her mother's house, and I'll go get some things from my parents' house, and we'll meet back at the apartment that night. It was over in an instant. I explained how Jane had been psychologically and physically aggressive in the months after I uncovered her cheating. I gave them screenshots of her conversations with this person. I told them I had remained silent to protect the peace, and how she had lashed out at them all when she felt they were assisting me behind her back. How out of character that was. When she threw a remote at me and swole in my eye while we were moving, I realized I had to go, and that's why I needed to take the money to get to safety. Jane arrived up to my friend's home seeking for me, and he told her I had moved and that if she showed up again, he would call the authorities while I hid upstairs. Heard how she frantically tried to find me to figure out what was going on, and how she reached out to our mutual friends to make amends and tell them it was all my idea, only to discover that the ones I had been talking to and subtly alluding to being abused for weeks, as well as the ones who remembered me coming to them after the first time she cheated, and the ones who had seen my eye, had passed along the information to her entire social circle, and she was met with threats how she told the last mutual friend she spoke to before he ghosted her that her mother said she'd pray for her and cut her off financially for living a unhealthy lifestyle until she can smarten up after seeing the photos, which she can't prove I ever sent because her mother wouldn't have kept them, and that she's severely depressed. She's imprisoned in a 6-month lease with no money, no friends to depend on, and no one to assist her remain afloat, save maybe her previous lover if she runs to him. I'll use her money to pay the rent on a new apartment for myself, and I'll buy my buddy a nice present as my collaborator in this. I intend to continue going to therapy, both to get over this and to work through my sentiments and how low I went to seek vengeance, since I don't want to carry this negativity with me in the future. After that, I want to relearn how to be single and enjoy life on my own, aided by the friends I inherited. Edit. Before anybody forgets what sub they're in, I realize this was a bad idea on my part, but that's okay with me. And no, I don't think this elevates me to her level. Over someone who trusted you and never did anything to violate that trust is not the same as seeking vengeance on someone who screwed you over. Coming to this sub to complain about people's morality is the same of going to the drug subreddit and lecturing them on the hazards of drugs.